Hello, I'm Andrew Lawless, and today I'm going to be presenting the topic of the consequences of freedom of speech on the internet. Today, users of the internet have the capabilities to speak to people across the world instantly, allowing for constant interaction of conflicting ideologies and cultures. Therefore, it's important to consider what the parameters for freedom of speech are for users of the internet and whether they should face consequences if those parameters are violated. This presentation considers freedom of speech as a right that should have regulations and consequences for said regulations. If those regulations are violated, then the offender must face the consequences according to the scale of the offense. Applying this to the internet is a difficult matter, but overall, I believe that users should be allowed to speak their minds towards other users, but they must face the consequences that come in events where harm occurs or has the potential to occur. I say this because enforcing consequences may help protect the well-being of fellow users, corporations, citizens, etc. Defining what is considered as harmful acts and what kind of consequences should be applied to the offender is the purpose of this presentation. To start off, I will be talking about cyberbullying and how it ties to the internet affecting the behaviors of its users. Cyberbullying is defined as a process of sending images or posting negative content to the internet with intentions of both defaming and harming someone's mental state. Cyberbullying should be a crime on the internet with substantial consequences due to the everlasting effects it can have on one's reputation and mental health. People that cyberbully have the potential to ruin someone's life just by a few clicks and keystrokes. Therefore, it is an act that should have notable consequences that offenders should face. For example, according to Canadian law, cyberbullying is a highly punishable act. The law defines cyberbullying as scenarios such as posting sexual images online of someone in privacy without their consent. Users that violate this law could be imprisoned for up to 5 years. Their computer, cell phone, or other device used to share the image could be seized, and they could be ordered to reimburse the victim for costs incurring in removing the intimate image from the internet or elsewhere. I agree with this kind of statement due to how significant the effects could have on the rest of the victim's life. Applying these kinds of punishments would aid in protecting the well-being of people's mental states. Cyberbullying occurs in a myriad of ways other than posting sexual content without consent, such as insulting and degrading in debates or general conversations. When people use the internet, they begin acting different compared to their normal behaviors due to several factors, most notably anonymity. This act was coined the term the online disinhibition effect, and it is one of the leading causes of cyberbullying. On the internet, people find it ethical to be harsh and degrading with their insults because they feel secure due to the sense of anonymity they have. In addition, they also forget there are other people on the other end of the screen when berating and becoming oblivious to how their words can affect their mental state and self-esteem. In specific scenarios, these acts of cyberbullying should be punishable. For example, there may be a case where a user is using a social media website to publicize their self-harm and mental instability. There may be users that view their content in a bad light and encourage the poster to further their self-harm and speak to them in a condescending manner. If the poster takes their comments to heart, then his or her conditions may magnify. People that participate in a scenario like this is an encouraging or berating user that should face consequences due to aiding in the worsening of a user's mental and physical state. In addition, there may be a similar scenario where a user posts content about self-harm and mental instability, but encourages their audience to participate. Depending on the scale of encouragement, those posters should face a corresponding consequence due to the possibility of assisting in the self-harm or suicide of their audiences. It's difficult to observe the extent of harm done on people in these kinds of scenarios, so therefore it's also difficult to determine the harshness of consequences. Now, a specific issue arises in the previously mentioned situations where users say these harmful things as jokes. This area is when deciding whether to punish the offenders becomes difficult. But overall, the general rule of thumb that I believe is that if a user causes harm in another user via cyberbullying, they should face the consequences bestowed to them depending on the scale of cyberbullying. Now, moving away from cyberbullying, another malicious action that must be observed is the advocacy of illegal activities. There have been occurrences where users of the internet have advocated committing illegal activities online, and while that alone is not a malicious action, advertising said illegal activities such as piracy is a malicious action that must have consequences applied to them. Freedom of speech ensures one can represent his or her thoughts on a topic. So if a user that posts a comment on social media saying something along the lines of piracy is a great opportunity for those poor enough to enjoy a company's product for free, they shouldn't face consequences. However, if a user posts a comment advertising a certain website or saying that everyone should boycott a certain company and pirate their products instead, then that is when they should face consequences due to bringing traffic to an illegal website and bringing harm to a company's revenue. In 1999, the video game industry lost approximately up to 109,000 jobs, $4.5 billion in wages, and $1 billion in tax revenues. These are significant losses that came as a result of video game piracy over the course of 1 year. So to protect it and countless other industries, making users that advertise piracy websites face consequences will aid in lessening the damage dealt to corporations via piracy. Another example of an illegal action advertisement that deserves consequences is the case of Paul Chambers, who was a person that posted on his Twitter account on May of 2011, "Crap, Robin Hood Airport is closed. You got a week to get your shit together, otherwise I'm blowing the airport sky high." He faced jurisdiction and was found guilty, despite him claiming the message was a joke and that he was not going to blow up the airport. Chambers appealed his decision 3 times, ultimately winning in 2012, causing all charges to be dropped. In my opinion, Paul Chambers should have faced the consequences for his message due to it still being a statement that involved threatening the lives of hundreds of people if law enforcement did not act. Him saying the message was a joke is not credible enough due to him being the one posting the message in the first place. Therefore, to ensure the safety of the airport and its passengers, law enforcement should have made him face the consequences. Now, imagine the same scenario, except instead, Chambers did intend to blow up the airport and law enforcement let him off after he said it was a joke. Because of this claim, they would have let a man blow up the airport. Situations where offenders advocate illegal activities like terrorism, even as a joke, is where they should face consequences to ensure the safety of the threatened citizens. The last malicious action that I'll cover in this presentation is the defamation of corporations. Users of the internet have the right to freedom of speech, which guarantees regulated protections on what they can and cannot say. However, the users are not the only ones that have protections. Companies also have protections that allows them to act on certain scenarios. For example, an employee for a business can be fired from the job for posting a controversial message on a social media website because it could potentially defame the corporation. In this context, the definition of a controversial message would include themes like racism, sexism, or other topics that the affected business does not advocate. I believe that businesses should be allowed the right to fire their staff members for that kind of thing, because no company should be forced to continue having an employee that brings defamation to a company. They should be given the choice to fire them in order to protect their self-interest, and the employees should accept it. In conclusion, freedom of speech on the internet permits users the ability to speak their mind, but they must face the consequences of their statements if they bring harm to other users, companies, or real-world citizens to protect the well-being of those affected.